There is a line in Bell Hook's book, Communion, The Female Search for Love, that I just love. She writes, "Not enough has been written about the transitional period women go through when we let go of old agendas for our lives and begin to embark on new journeys." And that line right there has been the thesis of my life, even though I've never thought to ask that question that way. Like many of you, I got the map from society, from my conditioning that you probably got too. And I was so good at following it. It was the successful teaching career, stable, scheduled, guaranteed, everything in its place. And from the outside, my life looked pretty great. And from the inside, eventually, after, just over a decade, I was suffocating. And one day, my body graciously got me out of it, call it burnout, a full reckoning with just utter dissatisfaction. And I just left. I gave up safety for freedom. And some people do that. They don't leave the life they had because they have a plan. They leave because they had to, and because something in them simply cannot stay. And that was certainly my story. I jumped. I hoped the net would appear, and it has, but not without its own challenges, not without meeting myself honestly and often along the way. And that transition, the one from the life you were given to the life you are choosing, is what I've been studying ever since, in myself and the hundreds of women that I've sat with who are in this season too. So I'm Andrea Tessier. I'm a high capacity coach for women who give a shit. And I use internal family systems and energetic work to help women like us build a self trust and capacity to hold the next big part of our lives. And last week on Substack, I wrote a piece called A Midlife Reckoning, when women let go of old agendas and begin again. And I'll link it below. But it paints the full picture of what this season looks like: the grief, the disorientation, the ingredients that seem to help. But today, I want to go somewhere the written piece only touches on. I want to do what I do best, and I want to look at the parts involved. Because what I've come to know and understand is that transitions are not just logical. It's not just about leaving the career or the relationship or the city. It's an internal experience. And inside that experience, there are parts of us that are working very hard. Some of them are helping, some of them are scared, some of them are dragging their heels. And so we really need to talk about them, because to talk about them means that we can understand. And we need to be able to understand ourselves so we can have an extraordinary relationship with ourselves. We can honor ourselves while we move through these processes. So let's talk high level overview of what some of the parts are that might be coming up for you, or maybe came up for you when you were on this similar journey. The first part that I'll name, and I'm going to call it the one that needs the guarantee. This part you might recognize as the part of you that says, I'm going to do this. I'm going to commit to this as soon as I know it's going to work. As soon as I know I'm going to be okay, right? It sounds reasonable, right? This part sounds okay. I'm just being smart here. But what this part is actually doing is keeping you in standby. It's waiting for the certainty of the ROI. It's waiting for the guarantee that never really comes. It's waiting for the net that really only appears after the jump. And underneath that part, like, we love our parts. All of our parts are good. But underneath that part, really driving it, what it's protecting is, underneath that part or connected to this part, is another manager part that can go into urgency mode. right? This is the part of us that is constantly scanning. It is hyper vigilant. It is, are we there yet? Why isn't this working faster? Comparing our chapter 1 or chapter 2 to somebody else's chapter 8 or chapter 10. Everyone else seems to be further along. I should be further along. It creates this frantic energy that can look like productivity, but it's actually fear wearing a very busy costume. And then another part that can come up when we're in this journey and taking big leaps is the doubt, the part that doubts. It's the part that says things like, are you sure you can really do this? Or who do you think you are? Right? You left the stable thing, the guaranteed thing for this. This part isn't trying to destroy you. It's trying to protect. It learned a long time ago that staying small is safer, and it's just doing its job. But this job isn't serving. And I want to name something that Hooks names so beautifully. So she doesn't use the language of parts work, but because I tend to see our inner experience through that lens, this is how I saw it. She talks about the cultural burdens we carry. She talks about the internalized voices of patriarchy, family, church, society, the stories that we have absorbed so deeply, we assume they are true, that you need a man to be safe, that more is better, that what success looks like, or what a good woman does. These are not just beliefs, they are parts that are holding these beliefs, parts that were formed in response to a world that handed us a very specific map and told us this is the only way. She writes. Yet I still had to contend with the overseers in my own mind. She calls them overseers. Whether using the voice of patriarchal family or church, these internalized authorities kept me in check. These were the voices insisting that sex before marriage was a sin, that I would ruin a good woman, that to choose to be smart would alienate men, that to be too smart would make a woman crazy. I tried to speak back to these voices in defiance, but I could never really let them go. So she talks here about parts and that it didn't work for her to fight them. Leaving that map that we had doesn't mean the parts will leave you, right? They come, they are loud, and the other part that comes up is grief. This is one important to name because we don't talk about it enough. There is real grief in this transition when we give up the life we were given for the one we are choosing. Grief for the life that we've left. Grief for the version of ourselves that was so good at following the rules. Grief for the promises that were never real, but we believed anyway, right? This part of us that's grieving needs to be witnessed, not fixed, not rushed, witnessed. And then the pattern that I see over and over in different ways, it's the one that takes one step forward and then collapses two steps back for a long time, right? This is what it looks like when parts are competing with each other. The brave part that says go, the scared part that says come back, the visionary part that can see the whole thing clearly, the exhausted part that just wants to rest. All of them are real, all trying to help. But the thing is when they're all pulling in different directions at the same time, it's disorienting. And that's not a sign that you're doing anything wrong. It is a sign that something very important is happening, right? And at the heart of it all, underneath every single one of these parts, there's always a little one that we call an exile in IFS. You might call an inner child, is a little one that's asking, is this safe? Am I going to be okay? Right? That's the real question. That always has been the question. And the part perhaps along with it that's always felt a little bit othered, a little bit different, a little bit weird, a little bit strange, that the one that never really quite followed the map, even when she was the part that never quite fit the map, even when she was following it perfectly. And that's the irony of this transition. Now you're being asked to build a life around the part that's been outcasted, that felt othered. The one that you probably spent years trying to manage and minimize and apologize for. So, what I just described, all of those parts, the one that needs the guarantee, the urgency manager, the doubt, the grief, the little one asking if she's okay, the one that felt different, they're not always taking turns. They're often speaking at the exact same time. And so what we call overthinking is this, right? What we call confusion, that's this. What we call freeze, that state where you know what you want to do and you can't, that's this. There's a full internal negotiation happening beneath the surface constantly, taking up a ton of energetic real estate. And most women in this transition are carrying all of it while showing up for their kids, their aging parents, their work, their relationships, their life. So if you're experiencing exhaustion, that is not weakness. That is the cost of doing all of that internal work without language for it, without the understanding, without really understanding the character of what's going on here. And that's the gap, right? That's what Hooks was pointing to, that not enough has been written about this. Not enough has been said. So what do we do? I don't want to just leave you with understanding. I want to leave you with things that you might be able to do with it. And so here's where I want to offer something that might be different from what you have heard before. If you've ever tried to silence your inner critic, you know how that goes. Or the part that just wants a second bowl of ice cream, or the part that keeps scrolling at midnight when you know you should be sleeping. Trying to silence them is almost impossible. And even when it works for a moment, they come back louder because we're coming back at it all wrong. None of these parts are bad. None of them are wrong. They are deeply, profoundly misunderstood in their intention. Right? The part that needs the guarantee is trying to keep you safe. The urgency manager is trying to get you to the finish line before something goes wrong. The doubt is trying to protect you from failure and humiliation. And the little one asking if she's going to be okay has been asking that since she was very small and nobody gave her a good enough answer. So these parts don't need to be silenced. They do not need to be repressed. They need to be understood. They need to be integrated. Right? Not fighting your own insides, getting curious enough about them, bringing self energy, your true self to them. Because self energy, that quality of calm, clarity, courage, and compassion, that is what actually moves the needle. Not willpower, not discipline, not trying harder. Self energy is what allows those parts to finally relax, to trust that someone is actually leading, that they don't have to work so hard anymore. So, what do we do with all of this? The answer I keep coming back to in my own life and in this work is not about silencing the parts. The question isn't how do I make them stop? The question is who is leading? When I am clear about which parts I am blended with, which parts are making the decisions, I get to make different choices. I get to decide if I want my parts to lead or if I want self to lead. I get to choose courage and clarity and trust over fear. And that's the practice, not a destination, not a formula, practice. And that's the most important thing that we can do in this season. Okay. If this resonated, the full written piece on Substack is linked below. If you're not already subscribed here, please hit subscribe. I make content like this every week for women like you who are done doing it the old way. See you next time.